Hey guys, Everseen here. So the new patch is coming out for PoE2 0.3, and I'm super excited to play, and I wanted to sit down and do a video about talking just about the Blood Mage in general. I know a lot of people have watched my Rake and Bloodhunt build guide for Blood Mage, so I figured I would give my 2 cents on sort of the situation with that build, if it's viable to even play in 0.3, and other builds I'm thinking about playing, and kind of the nerfs and the buffs of the Ascendancy, and just overall talking about it. So this might be a little bit of a longer video of me just talking about things. So yeah, to start off, I really want to talk about the buffs. So already Blood Mage was a very competitive Ascendancy. You know, there was a lot of good builds, like Spark Blood Mage was also really good. And just the overall tankiness of the build is quite exceptional, in my opinion, just being a hardcore player. So getting 2 more Ascendancy points is actually really big. Basically, when I was playing Blood Mage, I didn't have these 2 nodes, which was gain additional maximum life equal to 100% of the ES on equipped body armor, which obviously gives you a lot of flat life. I was using an Evasion and Energy Shield hybrid chest, so I only had 393 Energy Shield, but getting 393 flat life is quite significant. So having those 2 points was really nice. The other thing that I was doing for a while was I was actually running Gore Spike, which would give you increased critical damage bonus per 40 life. Now that this node is actually getting moved to the back, it's not really viable to pick that anyway. So your ideal, you know, situation would look like this anyway, with, you know, taking Blood Barbs first, and then just going into Grasping Wounds, and then Crimson Power. But now we have 2 more Ascendancy points to screw around with. So they've changed both of these nodes, Open Sores as well as Between the Cracks, and, you know, we don't really want spell damage leeches life because we're going to be an attack build with this type of build. But yeah, Between the Cracks got changed. I believe it is like some flask charge thing. Now, I don't know how you're going to really sustain your flasks a lot, because it's going to consume them a lot. And like, if we're also going to use Concoct on the build, which is a support gem that consumes your life flask charges, I don't necessarily know if I like this node. It would just be something that you'd have to feel out. But it does give you more physical damage per, you know, charge consumed this way. So I would assume, you know, you could probably consume 20% of a flask with like 120 charges. So I don't know, that's like 20-30 charges. So it's probably 20-30% phys damage, which is pretty good if you're going to go bleed build. So this is definitely an option. But also the new one, renamed to Whispers of the Flesh instead of Open Sores, is now going to say, you know, your curses aren't infinite duration, which does kind of hurt us. But if we're going to use Blasphemy, it really is kind of, it doesn't matter on this build. But now it grants enemies affected by your curses have at least 15% of life reserved. So it is kind of weird, but this kind of just counts as like 15% cull for bosses, right? Because, you know, that 15% of life is just always going to be gone. And the only thing that I don't know about this, and I think it will hurt the build, is the fact that we won't have targets be on full life if their life is reserved. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I don't know if a boss's bar is going to show, you know, the 15% removed and then there be like a gap, or if it's going to be, you know, removed and the new boss HP bar is just going to be all intact. I think it's going to be the first one, where it's actually, they're just not going to count as full health, which then really hurts us for using ambush on the build, because we're probably going to be going for, you know, always targets are on full life to get our maximum amount of damage. We even have this in the POB, where like on the skill tree, you're going to want to take, you know, Preemptive Strike, where you're getting crit damage bonus for enemies on full life. So I think that that in itself might even brick the build. So this might not even be viable to take at all. So we'll have to see about that. But yeah, there's been a couple nerfs, but not crazy. I was thinking, you know, it's easier to cap spell crit and maybe doing a Reap build, because Reap will inflict critical weakness, which will help you crit cap way easier. So I'm thinking that maybe Reap might be really good if you can get, you know, like that Awakened Spell Echo, which repeats like 2 more times, and then you know, getting crit capped with crit weakness is pretty good too. So Reap build is kind of something that I might be thinking about. But yeah, the nerfs, basically just overflow. The overflow, you know, if we had 3,000 life, we would then be overfilled to 4.5k life as opposed to 6k life, so it does hurt us a bit. But this build has so much recovery from the remnants, the life remnants, that I really don't even think this is that bad. Just because we have so much recovery. I would think this would be a lot worse on something like an Invoker Monk, where they use Meditate and they don't have as good of recovery with Energy Shield as you would with life. And then also the Tangletongue Nerf does make it harder to cap crit for attack builds, and it does hurt us because Tangletongue is also really nice for that Lightning Spear clear where you're getting the fork on critical hits. So you know, thus giving us less projectiles when we're not going to use Tangletongue. So there's a couple of things I've been thinking about, and I've been kind of screwing around with my own POB. So this is my current character in HCSSF level 95 Blood Mage, and you know, I've got I'm max geared out on this guy. So I've got like +3 amulet, +2 gloves, triple damage ring. I've got another like double damage ring. These gloves have double elemental damage. Yeah, and just like good runes. Anyway, this build is basically min-max. This is the build I'm sort of going to reference on how I think I would build this again, but let's just talk about skills and how crit chance and crit cap is going to work. So basically with Rake, this was my setup before, where I was using, you know, Ambrosia, Momentum, Concoct, Deep Cuts. These are all, you know, they're pretty much going to stay. You want to be consuming both of the flash charges stuff. Ambrosia is untouched now, it looks like, for this new patch, so we won't be losing that, like, 60% of damage is extra lightning damage, which is huge for our bleeds because of Blood Barbs. And now, you know, I put Ambush in here, and, like, we'll get to that, but Pinpoint Critical was pretty much what I was using because in the build previously, you weren't allowed to use multiple supports of the same one, but now you can. So it might be a situation where we take off Pinpoint Critical and we actually do Ambush, and as we can see, this does inflate our crit chance to 100%. Now, that's where it gets tricky, is because I'm not sure with taking this Ascendancy node, where I guess it doesn't show on here, but where the life is reserved on a boss. If they're technically not on full HP, then take Ambush off because it wouldn't work. You'd be at 56% chance to crit rather than 100%. This also works really bad if we do end up hitting a boss with Lightning Spear, thus them not being on full HP, and we're not hitting a critical strike, which would then bring us down to 56% critical. This is with a Seaglass Spear. I have put in a Tangletongue that is 8%, and then I've also put in a Seaglass Spear. So we'll talk about the Tangletongue nerf first. This is an 8% chance Tangletongue, which would be a perfectly rolled Tangletongue in the new patch. And then you could actually vow this to get higher, but I'm not doing it that way. Like, I'm not calculating it that way. This is, even getting a max rolled one is not really that reliable. But we have a base, the Seaglass Spear, which actually gives a ridiculous amount of crit, which I never even knew. So a rare spear might be a better option than Tangletongue. I definitely think on the high end, if you had a really good spear, you would actually have more damage than you would single target from the 0.2 build. So just looking at the spears, just scrolling through, there's a common denominator among all these spears is that their critical hit chance is 5, 5, 5, 6.5%, 5, 5, 5 across the board. But there's one spear that has 10% base critical hit chance. Now, this is really good because we can actually get the suffix, which gives us critical hit chance tier 1, which gives us like another 4 to 4.5 to 5%. This spear right here that I pushed into POB has the minimum roll of a tier 1 modifier, so you can actually go to 5% crit chance. And it also has the mid-roll of melee skills, so +3 to melee skills. Now, melee skills are going to be both Rake and Bloodhunt, so this is going to be extremely good for scaling damage. If you can, say, get a spear with a T1 crit modifier and a +5 melee skills, you're looking at some really big damage. Now, I'll just show you guys the multipliers here for Rake and Bloodhunt. Basically, what was achievable for my 0.2 build was probably like a level 24 or level 25 Bloodhunt. I guess right now it would be technically a 25 on my current character. So, you know, you're looking at, you know, a Rake did 181% damage, and now it would do 250% damage. So that's a quite significant increase in damage just because of the gem levels. And then as well as Bloodhunt, we're looking at a 487%, where we're looking at actually a 784% damage effectiveness, which is almost double. So that's where this kind of gets insane. Now, say if I had my +2 gloves and my +3 amulet and a +5 spear, that would bring us to a whopping level 30 Bloodhunt, which would give us 1263% damage effectiveness. That is a triple damage effectiveness. So that's looking really good. Yeah, so level 20 to level 30, we could say. And this is obviously very high min-max, but this is almost doubling as well. So yeah, the damage potential is still there. It's just going to be a build that's hard to get crit capped and also min-max. But I do think that this build is still extremely strong. I think that you could do it. It just takes... You're going to eat shit for a long time playing this build until you get to the spot where you feel really good. Thus, this makes me to believe that this is actually a really good build to go as like a second build. So I'm not really sure if I want to start Blood Mage, but this is going to be still a really good vector for scaling, for doing, you know, like these plus melee gems and doing crit chance. And as you can see, we'll do, say, my old Tangletongue, which was like 19%. We have 95% crit chance on my Rake. And if I use the Seaglass Spear, we're at a 56%. But then if I use Ambush, we're actually crit capped with a rare spear. So before I wouldn't have needed to use Ambush, and I would have been almost crit capped with the Tangletongue. So that kind of gives you a gauge as to like how much this base crit chance from Tangletongue really like accelerated the viability of the build. Like, this is so easy to get crit capped when you have no gear. So Tangletongue, you know, overall had 25% base crit, and then if I'm going to use a Seaglass Spear, I'm going down to almost like 14.5% base crit. So you have to account for that. And then as well, on a rare spear, you can also roll prefixes. So I could roll elemental prefixes, which I could go for any elemental prefix or just straight up physical damage, and it would actually give me quite a bit of damage for my bleeds. So the problem here is getting your crit cap. So I mean, even on the tree, I opted to drop a bunch of this stuff. I know I was pathed into deterioration, but I don't think you really need to go into that now that I've seen the support gem Lacerate. There's a level 3 Lacerate, it looks like, in the new supports, which is now going to give 100% bleed. So in the current iteration of the game, let me find it here, it is actually only 50% to inflict bleed. So whatever this is, the leaks, bleed, I guess is what they called it, but it's Lacerate support. So this is 50%, at tier 2 it's 75, and at tier 3 it's 100% chance to cause bleeding, which is really strong. So our lightning spears are always going to bleed, and we're going to have tons of elemental damage from our rings and all these other sources where you'll still have pretty decent damage, I think. But it's just going to be less projectiles because of that Tangletongue was sort of carrying you. But yeah, I've taken off deterioration and I pathed up north a bit to grab more crit chance through Careful Assassin. You could even drop something like Throat Seeker to ensure that you have more crit chance, but it is very good crit damage bonus, so it's like you're probably not going to omit that. But I took crit damage or crit chance everywhere else that I really could, and I, you know, took away this crit damage bonus down here to grab this crit chance, and then you're probably going to have crit chance on your amulet, and you can kind of see how this is starting to get to be a problem, because we don't have enough crit chance in the build to really like reliably hit crits all the time. So, you know, without ambush, I'm only a 56%, and if I use something like Pinpoint Critical, I am at a 90%, which gives you more consistency in your critical hits. So it's just what you want to do personally. Like ambush, you can go for more of a gamble. If you're in softcore, this is more of a strategy for you, I think, because you retain your critical strike multiplier at 737% and your crit cap. But if you use, you know, Pinpoint Critical, you go down to 546%, and your crit chance is not quite capped, but, you know, you have more consistent damage. Now, the problem with this build is if you don't crit, you are kind of just a sitting duck when you use your Rake and Bloodhunt, because there's such big, what should I say, attacks to set up, and also there's a bit of a cooldown. So let's look at Bloodhunt now, and I'll show you kind of what I mean by like a cooldown. So Bloodhunt, I was using Inevitable Critical, which actually gets buffed in this patch. So it gains critical hit chance every second up to 100%. So say you can't really spam this. You can use it, you gotta wait like 4 seconds, then you can use it again to have all that critical hit chance retained, right? So I believe... Now, I'm sorry, I gotta like flip through this because it's critical hit chance. I'll just do critical and then I'll flip through. But there is, I found it right here. So Fated Execution, I don't know. This is like all Chinese translated, but I believe this is actually Inevitable Critical. Skill increases by 25% per second up to a maximum of 200%. So this is more like you gotta wait 8 seconds to actually get a full crit out of Inevitable Critical. So yeah, it's just, you can see where this might get really clunky to play. So that's why I'm like sort of outlining this and how bad the Tangletongue Nerf hurts us, but I'm not going ahead and saying that this is impossible to build. You can definitely make this as like a second build, but it's more like a build that you want all the gear put together before you actually like attempt it. So things that you need on Bloodhunt are going to be, you know, Impale is pretty much inevitable. You really want that. Overextend is really good for scaling your critical strike multiplier because it gives you more critical damage bonus, which is multiplicative. So this is multiplicative with all of your increases, whereas say if it just said 30% increased critical damage bonus, it wouldn't go from 737 to 928. It would go from 737 to 767. So Overextend is really good for multiplying your critical strike multiplier to even, you know, bigger amounts. So I feel like these two gems are pretty much, you need them. Bloodlust might be one that you can omit and add other things, like maybe you want to do Pinpoint Critical and you would be crit capped with 737% crit multi on my build, which, you know, honestly is nothing to scoff at. 737% critical strike multiplier on an attack such as Bloodhunt is actually quite significant because of the amount of raw damage that you get from the skill. So if we take off, I have number of seconds since inevitable crit, go down to 0. We're still at a 90% crit chance with Pinpoint Critical. Now, if we were to go ambush, it's 100%, like I said earlier, but we're not going to be on 100% likely. You know, the thing about, I guess, that I could mention too is that the whole lightning spear hitting a boss before you do your rake, technically it will count as a bleed, which will then not give... I think that there's a portion of hit damage and a portion of bleed damage because, you know, when you do a rake, you see like the bleed, you know, queue up on the boss bar and it goes to a certain point, and then there's the really dark red, and then there's like the faint red, which is supposed to be your total bleed. But there is also like a portion of hit which is going to hit the boss, and if you break their energy shield and also hit the boss, like you're not going to be on 100% health. So I just think ambush is like super gimmicky to use. It's really up to you what you want to do, but I think like if I were to play this build again, I would have to go Pinpoint Critical. Even though it's not capping my crit, I feel like the only skill that I would really want to use ambush on is probably Lightning Spear, because when you're mapping, typically everything's going to be on full life and there's so many different targets to choose from. So I feel like that's probably the best use. But yeah, if we even look at Lightning Spear, this is without a Tangletongue too, so this is already kind of nerfed in the crit chance. It's nerfed in the damage per frenzy, which doesn't hurt us a ton, but it did give you extra projectiles. Now we have less projectiles. We're going to have less projectiles from Tangletongue, so you can kind of see how this has like a compounding effect on like the actual effectiveness of Lightning Spear. I do think that that skill is still going to be kind of ridiculous with a build like this, where you can just get a ton of flat elemental from your rings and stuff and just use Lacerate, and then you basically just bleed every target to death with tons of elemental damage. But yeah, Volt is going to give us lots of elemental, which will contribute to our bleed. We're going to use Fork. Innervate is a flexible slot. In my opinion, you could put Innervate on Herald of Thunder, for example, and then basically what you're doing is you're proccing Innervate with Herald of Thunder, and that's going to be like your uptime while you're mapping. But Lightning Spear, like Innervate, you could probably put in ambush here to, you know, facilitate that crit. And then every, you know, target that you're going to hit while mapping is going to be 100% crit, which you know, that's pretty good. But it is less projectiles, so that hurts the build overall. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of shed some light. A lot of people have been asking me if this build is viable. If it's not viable, I'm going to leave it really up to you and what you guys think. If you guys have found anything else, like, please let me know. Or if I did anything wrong here in my calculations or speculations, definitely let me know. But this is sort of like my thoughts on this type of build for this upcoming patch. I don't really think it's as viable as a starter. I think this is more of a second build where you're going to want to gear up and yeah, min-max this, because I think that this will actually do in turn more damage single target than last patch, once you get everything sort of fit together. But yeah, that's about it for the video. I think I may be starting either Unarmed Invoker, Lightning Arrow, Lightning Rod, Deadeye, or a Blood Mage of some sorts, maybe like Chaos Blood Mage into Reap, because Reap is actually a spell. So I will be getting that, you know, 15% base crit, and then scaling with crit weakness, which you get inherently from Reap. So, you know, getting crit cap to be kind of cool on that. But yeah, basically the way that this Ascendancy shape up for me is that, since I'm going to be playing HCSSF, Deadeye is probably the squishiest one to start on, until, you know, you get like probably halfway through the game, then you start to actually feel decent. Same with Blood Mage, but Blood Mage scales its tankiness a lot better. The amount of recovery that you get just from the life remnants is kind of crazy. Like, I'll show you guys in game. Basically, this is my character right now, and I have life remnants on with pretty much all the supports that you can use for life remnants. And let me see here. It'll show me per remnant. Yeah, so life recovered per remnant is 658. Now, the other buff, I guess, that I didn't mention was that the remnants, they actually will spawn from just a hit and not a critical hit now. So that's actually a really big buff, because, you know, before I was critting almost every time in a map anyway. So I guess I was generating about the exact same amount of remnants. But every pack I was probably getting, you know, 10 to 20 remnants, which is about 6,000 to 12,000 life recovery over 4 seconds. So you can just imagine how tanky this made me feel, and I basically just blew over the entire game playing this build. So Blood Mage tankiness, I'm surprised they left life remnants alone, to be honest. The overflow hit was kind of a hit, but not really, in my opinion. I think we're kind of fine. But yeah, that's about it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about. But yeah, the Remnants is like a big portion of why I want to start Blood Mage. But yeah, it would probably be a spellcaster into like a Reap build with that new lineage support for double spell echo or whatever. So yeah, that's about it, guys, I think. And yeah, maybe catch me on Unarmed Invoker. I think that'll be pretty cool. You get crit capped really easily. Might do unarmed on another class as well if it starts, like, if it's actually really good, like if Hollow Palm Technique's actually good. And then I'm also eyeing some spear skills, because spears are still really good. Yeah, that's about it. All right, boys, I'll talk to you soon. I'll probably do another video on what I'm actually starting, but this is kind of my thoughts for now. Anyway, peace.